This is sort of a follow-up to my last video, so if you haven't watched that, it's fine. You don't need to watch that video to be able to understand what I'm talking about in this video. So in the last video, I bashed the BLM movement a lot, but I realized I didn't really offer any solutions myself. So today we're going to be doing some of that. So first of all, when you want to solve a problem, you need to achieve unity. And what BLM is doing right now is far from unity. They're antagonizing people, specifically white people, and police officers by saying things like ACAB and defund the police. This sort of antagonizing does not help. This sort of virtue signaling by repeating these catchphrases does not work. I don't believe in an eye for an eye. That is not how problems can be solved. And I guess I could debunk these sayings, but I don't want to cause further division. And obviously there are people who are saying these things just so they could feel oppressed. But the basis, or at least my basis, is that if you have never been a slave, and if you have never owned a slave, then you don't owe anything to each other. The idea that somehow every single white person is complicit in systemic racism is wrong. And this antagonization does not help when it comes to solving problems. In order to solve racial inequality, we have to start from the top and work our way down. I see a lot of people nowadays talking about this chart, and what it basically says is that black people account for about 50% of murder and manslaughter crimes in the United States. So why is that? There are also a lot of people, like Ben Shapiro, who will say that it's because of their culture, which is not true at all. I actually use this chart in my racism video, but it essentially suggests that black people have a much lower household income than white people. Now, obviously, being poor doesn't justify you committing crimes, but being in poverty generally gives you a higher chance of committing crimes because, you're desperate, you're struggling economically, you don't really have any other paths to go. Obviously, it's not justifying it, but committing crimes is probably your last resort. So how do you fix this income inequality? Well, by offering better education. This is kind of funny, but as I was making this video, Trump signed an executive order for hiring based on skill instead of hiring based on degrees, which essentially means you don't really need a degree for a job anymore. So you're kind of working against me here, Donald. How schools are funded are through the tax money of the community. If your community is poor, then you would have worse schools because you have less money to fund the schools. So you have two ways of going around this. The first way is to get rid of this regional-based school enlisting system. So how the system basically works is essentially every single school has a radius, and unless you live inside the radius, you cannot go to the school. So if you live a little bit off of that radius, you still can't go to the school. Obviously, there are some exceptions. For example, if you're in a certain program that the school offers. But other than that, you will not be able to go to that school. Instead, you will go to the school for which its radius covers you. Now, I think it will be beneficial to get rid of this program, to get rid of these radiuses for schools, so that even if you live far away from the school, you can still go there. This also means that you may have to provide busing for some students who will live far away. There should also be some exceptions and priorities where students who live close to the schools should have priority over students who live further away from the schools. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones paying taxes for the schools. But other than that, this system ensures that every single child has the ability to get equal quality of education, which will ensure a higher chance of success in life. The second way is for the government to invest in these poorer communities. This will attract businesses into going into these poor communities and essentially create more jobs for these poor people. However, at the same time, they have to be taught how to use this money well because they have been given handouts like this before. And clearly, they haven't stepped up to that promise. A side effect of government handouts is that it promotes laziness. People will just decide to live off of government welfare forever. So it's also important to teach them how to use this money. Aside from these two options though, I don't think there's anything else we can do. I hear a lot of people repeating these catchphrases, especially this one called institutionalized racism. Essentially, they're trying to say that there's some sort of laws which are preventing black people or minorities to thrive in the United States, or in Western culture anyway. But if anything, there are laws which are discriminating against white people to create opportunities for minorities. When you look at laws like affirmative action, which you should read about, it essentially discriminates against white people to give more opportunities for people of minority backgrounds. So unless somebody out here can point out to me where the discriminatory laws are, I'm going to stand with my point that there are no laws which discriminate against people of minority backgrounds. I think systemic racism exists, but I think it exists in our society. History has consequences, and hundreds of years of history where minorities are being discriminated against will have consequences. People need to learn to not be racist and to get rid of their ignorant ideologies. Being against racism needs to be the standard of our society. Since we are the most progressive generation so far, I hope we can make that change.